Okay, the second step is now that I've got my loop started and I've taped it up just so it doesn't unravel, I'm going to actually cut the end of this string. I always like to do arm's length, so if you look at me on the bottom right, I'm going to pull this string to my arm's length and then cut it. So just because you don't want too much string, but you also want enough to be able to do some work. So I'm just going to cut the end of that string, and I'm going to take my plastic bookbinding needle that we used, and this should be pretty easy to thread. Just notice I'm pinching the string or the yarn at the very end so that I can feed that through the eye of the needle. You do have the needle threader that you can use, that we use with the embroidering. I just don't think you'll need it really. You can tie a knot. I'm going to tie a knot just so that this doesn't fall off as I'm working. So I'm going to crisscross, pull that through. Again, I can double, I don't think I need to double knot. I think that's enough. So there's just a little bit of a tail, but here's my thread that's attached to the beginning of my basket. Now let me take this tape back off and make sure, there we go. I don't think I should need that anymore. Now I'm going to continue to wrap just a little bit more. I'm not going to worry so much about this little tail here. And I'm going to continue to wrap it in that same direction. Now what I want to do, now that I have probably about, I don't know, maybe half an inch, I could grab my ruler, but I'm going to fold this in, creating a coil. And now with this needle, because my yarn is going in this direction, I'm going to feed this needle through that hole that I just created and pull that through. Now as I pull this through, I'm holding this nice and tight, this coil where I folded it, and I'm going to pull that nice and tight. And I'm going to go through that maybe 2 or 3 times, back through that middle, pulling that tight. And I'm not worried about that little white area because I can cover that up later and sew it through. So I've gone through the eye of my beginning of my basket 2 or 3 times over that area. Now I'm going to continue to wrap. I'm just going to move that growth. I'm going to continue to wrap around maybe 10 times. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And continue to fold and roll that in. And again, my needle is going to go through the hole. And again, 2 or 3 times. I'm going to go 3 times. So I'm holding that here. That's 1. Back through the bottom, 2. Notice my left hand is pinching all of this. It's holding all of this together. And this is 3. So again, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And again, fold and wrap. And I'm still going through that middle hole because that's still the closest area. So going in the same direction 3 times, 1, 2, and 3. Let's pull that down. And then I can probably get maybe one more time wrapping this yarn around my white rope 10 more times. 1, 2, I'm going to go a little faster. Now I've run out of yarn. So what do? First, I'm going to cut this off and get more yarn. But before I do that, if you have other yarn, I do have some other yarn. If you want to mix colors, you can mix colors. But at this point, I'm going to take these 2 ends. I am going to actually unravel this a little bit because this is really too short. Even though I have small hands, it's going to be too short for me to try to tie a knot. So what I'll do is I'll hold these 2 ends together and loop this. That's the end of the yarn that's wrapped on my coil and the end of the yarn wrapped on my cardboard, and tie a slip knot like that. So now that's one way to continue my yarn. And then I will cut this. Just cut that excess. These scissors are not that great. And again, I'm going to go arm's length. So I'm here. Whoops. I went a little bit longer than arm's length. You can, I'm just approximating arm's length. That's up to you. But again, I'm going to feed this through the end of that yarn into that needle and tie a knot on the end of that needle just so that my yarn doesn't come undone. or my needle doesn't come undone, just like that. So that's a repeat. That's back to there. So now let me go back to here. I'm going to wrap, remember I unraveled it, so I'm going to wrap it at least to that knot. Now I can cover that knot with this string, but again, I'm going to keep wrapping, so I'm not going to worry too much about that knot sticking out, because again, I can cover that. So I'm going to fold that closed, and I'm going to do this a couple more times just to show you where you're going to start to change where you're sewing. So right now, this is still going to be reaching into the middle of the circle. So I'm going to go through this 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now, I'm going to wrap it 10 times again, like I've been. So I'll do this quickly. And by wrapping the yarn around that 10 times, it just gives me, about 1/2 inch increments before I sew it into the middle. But now I want you to look. Instead of sewing through the middle of the hole, I'm going to go to the next gap between, the next closest gap from the previous coil. So now, instead of going through the big hole, you don't always want to go through the middle. Now I'm going to sew through the gap between the previous coil. So that's 1, and again I'm going to hold that tight. That's 2 and 3. Let me do that one more time just to show you what I mean. So again, I'm going to go over this 10 times-ish. Hopefully that my coil, see now I'm getting sloppy because I'm going so fast. Take your time. I'm trying to do it quickly for the demo. Covering that white rope, and after I've wrapped it about 10 times, about that length, now again, instead of going through that hole, there's the gap closest to it, the coil closest to it. So I'm going to punch through from behind and pull that tight. That's 1, again to the back, 2, 3. Okay. So from here, I'm just going to continue to repeat that. I have some other videos I can show you as well that use different yarns to clarify.